and welcome. This is the first lecture on period 3, which is the American Revolution. And so we're just going to set this one up, put a little bit of context, and then we'll have a look at the first part of the American Revolution, which is the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War. All right, so period 3, it's from 1754 until 1800, and I very much agree with 1754. I've got a lot of issues with 1800, which we'll get to in good time. But these are the dates that the people at AP have chosen. So 1754 is the beginning of the 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War, and it ends with the election of Thomas Jefferson in 1800, known as the Revolution of 1800, because this is the transfer of power, a peaceful transfer of power from one faction, the George Washington, John Adams Federalist faction, to Thomas Jefferson and his people's faction. They are calling themselves the Republicans or the Democratic Republicans, or just the Jeffersonians. And so we had a peaceful transfer of power. So it worked. The republic that they fought and set up worked. They were able to peacefully transfer power. We can break down this period into 3 sub-periods: the Revolution, the Constitution, and the first administrations of George Washington and his successor, John Adams. And the Revolution itself, it wasn't inevitable. It didn't have to happen. Other colonies like Canada, Australia, they didn't have revolutions, and they're able to achieve, a level of independence peacefully from England. But the Americans, they fought for it, and it was an expression of Republican ideals. And the Constitution, they're looking for a balance between, each state, they want to be taking care of themselves, Massachusetts, Virginia, New York, but at the same time, they want to be part of something bigger. They want to come together as a single nation, a single country. And so they're looking for that balance between power of the states and power of the national government. And the Constitution was their solution to that. It wasn't the first attempt. It was the second attempt at that. And then finally, the last part, we'll look at, the Washington administration, the tough times, not easy. They're being kicked around by Britain and France. They're getting embroiled in bickering between Britain and France, Napoleon, all of that. And they're really not able to exert their power. They're seen upon as an ugly duckling. And, Britain and France very much expected them to fail and it not to work and them to break apart. And they did break apart, but peacefully in their government. There's disagreements, and it led to 2 factions, as I mentioned, and they settle into a 2-party government system, and which we still have today, but it's gone through many transformations, which is a major theme that we'll be looking at, politics and power as we move forward. All right, so let's look at the war, but let's put in a little bit of context. The French and Indian War was not the first war that Britain and France were fighting at this time, and there was earlier ones, and it's all about mastery in the Americas, but it's also about influence in Europe. It's sort of both, and we can see that there was other ones before. We don't really need to get into those, it's part of the Americas being involved in other conflicts that other ones are going to come later as well. So the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War. It's about this river. It's about the Ohio River right here. This is good land, good farmland, good water, good climate. People in the Americas here, they're looking at that going, I'd love to have a little piece of that. Rich people like George Washington comes from a good family. He's a young man. He's looking, if I can just get a little piece of that, maybe I can really gain some wealth. And others are looking to that as well. Who has the land? Well, according to this map, it's the French. The French don't have it. It's natives. Natives are on that land. And the French have a very good relationship with the natives. And as trading partners, the French are small in numbers, and so they need a good relationship with the natives for access to those resources that the French would like, the fur in particular. And the English, they want to trade with the natives as well, but they're more interested in gaining control of the land, because the English are bigger in numbers, big in population, and they're looking to expand their borders, go across the Appalachian Mountains, get through the gaps, and then get down that Ohio River Valley and to settle it. It's coveted very much so. So there is a change in the map. In one of those earlier wars, this was through the War of Austrian Succession. We do have a change, and the English a little bit more, up in here, and access to the fur trade through the Hudson Bay up there. But still, it hasn't really been settled. Who's going to be the master of this continent? Which one will prevail? And so later fighting does break out, and it does break out in the Ohio Valley. A young George Washington led an expedition up in there, and fighting breaks out, and then this spreads into the greater conflict. And we don't need to know all the details of the war, but here's one detail that we do need to know. The Americans win, and the English win. They are the winners of this war, and they win despite themselves, the Americans, despite their inability to join. And as Ben Franklin, who drew this, urging the Americans to join together, the colonies to join together as one in some sort of a relationship for defense, for being able to exert a collective power against the French and against the natives. And he drew this up saying, if we don't join up, we're going to die. The natives and the French are going to be the masters of the continent. So they attempted to join up. They met in upstate New York in Albany on the Hudson River, and they came up with an agreement where they would agree to common defense in some other areas, and then that agreement is brought back to each of the different colonies, and the representatives of those colonies say nope, and the Crown, the governor, say nope, and it fails, but it is a first attempt at some kind of unity. And despite being able to come up with a common agreement, they still win, and they win really not so much from successes in America, but the successes of Frederick the Great over in what's today Germany, Frederick the Great of Prussia, later Germany. And they're able to defeat the French, and the French were never able to send really a strong military presence to the Americas. And so this was a big reason for a British victory in this war. And so we get a change, and this is the main idea of this, the effect of this, the change from this to this. And the French are out, and apparently they're still on this map. Oh, I guess they're down there. Okay, at least they've got a little bit down in the Caribbean, but in the continent themselves, they're out. The British take control of New France. So Quebec and Montreal, there's about 20,000 French colonists up there. How are we going to deal with them? That's going to be an issue. Catholic too. Ooh, we got Catholics now part of the British Empire. And the natives. What's the Crown going to be doing with the natives as well? And we can see this line here. Let's have a look, the meaning of this line. That's very important to how this is going to spur the American Revolution. So this change is this effect from the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War, is going to be a major cause of the American Revolution. And what we have is a change in relationship. I'm going to come back to this in a moment, okay? So a changed relationship. We got three players, the British, the Americans, and the natives. The British had gone deep in debt, really deep in debt. They borrowed and borrowed to help win this war. And so they're heavily in debt, and they've got a couple of goals, right? They want peace in North America, and they need money. Now, they want peace with the natives. They want peace because they can't afford to fight the natives, and they really have no desire to. And so they're also worried that the natives, with those French people up in the St. Lawrence River, are going to, rebel against their rule. And they feel that the American colonists should participate in meeting these two goals. Now, the Americans don't give a damn about those goals. They fought for land, for the Ohio Valley, but the natives on that valley, the British want peace with them. So there's a bit of a conflict there. And the natives themselves are the biggest losers of all. They don't have their French allies anymore. They don't have anyone to go to. They're now kind of alone in a way. And this leads to the natives saying, well, we need to, at this point, assert ourselves. And this is where you get Pontiac's rebellion or uprising, where in the Ohio Valley, they're looking, okay, the war between the British and the French is now over, and we now need to say, we're the ones of the Ohio River. It's not yours, it's not the Americans, it's ours. And so they're trying to gain control. So if you look at this, go to this map here, and it shows Pontiac's uprising here. They made concerted attacks against the outposts, the forts in Detroit, Fort Detroit. The fort up here, which is, we can see it's a very good location where the lakes meet. Another fort here between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, and Fort Pitt, what's now Pittsburgh today, there. Trying to say, it's okay, the French might be gone, but we're not. Now, the British respond to this by going, okay, we don't want war with you guys. We want peace. And so their main goal is to keep peace by preventing the Americans from crossing this line. And they drew a line and say to the Americans, you may not settle beyond this line. Now, the Americans are very much pushing against that line. And to them, they're saying, well, we fought this war and died so that we could push across. And so they're very angry about this decision. But from the British point of view, this is necessary at this time. Now, in the future, sure, maybe you can cross this line. They don't see it as a permanent line, but the Americans don't understand that point of view or refuse to listen to that British point of view. So let's finish by looking at, a before and after relationship. Before the Crown, the relationship with the colonists is mercantilism. The colonists are provide resources and purchase manufactured goods. Otherwise, they'll leave them alone. That's an idea of salutary neglect. And the relationship with the Native Americans, they see them as sometimes allies against the French. Otherwise, they're just really not concerned with them. The colonists, they're thinking, to the Crown, they resent the mercantilist policies, but at the same time, they welcome them. They get the protection of the British Navy with their trade. They're part of this British Empire. So they somewhat resent that they can't trade freely with other people, which they do sort of illegally, but to the most part, they're comfortable in this relationship. And the relationship with the Native Americans, well, they need them as allies against the French, but they also are coveting their land, and otherwise they have no respect for them at all. Now, the Native Americans, their relationship with the British Crown, well, they welcome the trade with them, gifts, which is part of the diplomacy, and so they're beneficial. And the relationship with the American colonies, well, they don't trust them, and with good reason. And they also don't like that the Americans don't really defend themselves well against the French. That whole idea of that join or die. The natives looked at the colonists and said, "Why can't you defend yourselves? Why can't you join up and defend yourselves? And why do you you rely on us as a military alliance?" Now, that's the before. The after. The Crown needs the colonists. They need them, to help pay for the war. And so that idea of just leaving them alone is going to end, and it's going to trigger the revolution. And they need the colonists, to have a better relationship with the natives there. And towards the Native Americans, they want to placate them. They want to quiet them. That Pontiac's rebellion put the scare into them. And so that's the whole idea of the proclamation line as a temporary way to reassure the natives that there's going to be peace. And now in the future, who knows? But for now, they need a peaceful relationship with them. Now the colonists, they are pissed off. I can't emphasize that enough. This is where I want to just put out some F-bombs to properly describe the way that they see this change. They are angry over the proclamation line, angry over new taxes that are put on them, angry over that there's redcoats, British soldiers in them, and angry that they've died for this Ohio Valley and now they're not getting it, and they're angry over their lack of respect that they're getting. As far as their thinking towards the Native Americans, no need for them. They want them out for them. And the Native Americans are the biggest losers. They can no longer ally one against the other. They've definitely lost a degree of power that they had, and they're really now caught between the fighting that's going to break out between the Crown and the colonists, which is the American Revolution. All right. Thank you very much.